All right. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for taking this opportunity to join both TREC, the Federation of Community Power Cooperatives, and Faith in the Common Good for a webinar on renewable energy in Ontario and also the possibilities provided to community power cooperatives and also faith groups through renewable energy development in the province. Just a quick brief, TREC is the Toronto Renewable Energy Cooperative, though we call ourselves TREC now. We've been incorporated since 1998, and our mission is to enable community power within the province of Ontario, either through developing renewable energy cooperatives ourselves, providing community securities management to co-ops, or just holding events and webinars like this to ensure that people are provided as much information as necessary or as they need to get started and get interested. The Federation of Community Power Cooperatives, FCPC for short, is a federation of just over 20 renewable energy cooperatives in the province of Ontario. The reason the federation was formed was to ensure that resources could be shared between co-ops to face common challenges and barriers together and continue to spread community power across this province. Lucy Cummings from Faith in the Common Good is also in attendance, and she will also talk about their organization and their initiatives within this presentation. So without further ado, let's get started. The agenda for today, we're going to cover sort of three main sections. One, more general information about renewable energy, what is renewable energy, the sector in Ontario. Then we're going to review briefly the policies that have enabled renewable energy in the province today. And then we'll cover community power and the cooperative enterprise model. I should say that this webinar is sponsored by the Community Energy Partnership Program, which is a grant program from the now Independent Electricity System Operator of Ontario. And they have been key in supporting, the expansion of knowledge about renewable energy and community power in this province. So, why learn about renewable energy? As many in this webinar probably are very familiar with, traditional energy sources that use fuels are not replenishable in the short term, and we will run out of them. And also, renewable energy is responsible for less harm to the environment and individuals that are around the generation, but also when we talk about carbon-heavy sources around the world. As many of us know, if we are burning carbon fuels, for example, the negative side effects of that are not only retained locally, but can spread around the globe as well. But one thing renewable energy has also provided for, both within Canada and globally, is that there are opportunities for community involvement and benefit as well. So through aspects like community power, renewable energy co-ops, etc. We do see some questions on the left-hand side there. We can address those at the end of the webinar. So if you have any concerns or queries that pop up throughout, please feel free to type them in the left-hand corner and left-hand side, and we will do our best to answer them at the end. All right. So what is renewable energy then? Typically, renewable energy is defined as energy that's produced by any source that is renewed through natural processes. So this includes wind, solar, water, geothermal, and tidal energy. As of 2012, the most recent statistic we have, 19% of the entire global energy consumed was produced via renewable sources. But renewable energy, in many ways, is not that different from other forms of energy, sort of at a very basic level, in that energy is generated when a force, whether it be heat, water, or wind, turns the blades of a turbine, and the turbine is connected to a shaft, which then creates and moves electrons, which creates current for electricity. Of course, solar is different in this case, as it's not turbine-based, but that is the general principle behind it. Right now, what we're going to do is we're actually going to cover the different types of renewable energy available in Ontario right now under the Feed-in Tariff program, and we have some video aids to help us. So we can start with wind. So after wind, we also want to quickly cover bioenergy. Bioenergy essentially refers to, energy that's produced from organic materials, and in most cases, the digestion of organic materials. So there's landfill mass, biomass, and biogas. Specifically, we want to focus on the biogas development, of which there are quite a few co-ops participating right now, even though we're hearing of a few moving into biomass as well. But essentially in the biogas process, there's organic waste that is digested through anaerobic digestion processes, creating gas. This gas is burned in a generator, and then that in turn creates energy. There are some interesting things about biogas in that the byproducts created include heat and fertilizer. Oftentimes the fertilizer can then be sold back to the agricultural industry, which creates food, and then which then returns back into organic waste. So for those of us who are particularly into closed-loop cycles, there is some pretty interesting stuff going on within bioenergy. Another form that we have is water power. So again, still focused on the turning of a turbine in order to generate electricity. However, in this case, we're mostly relying on gravity and physics. Reservoirs do dam up water over the long term, and as it is released downstream, it spins the turbine, generating energy and electricity. As many of you know, hydroelectric is also a way that people have decided to store energy when it is not needed in the grid by pumping water upstream and then releasing it downstream to produce energy when it is needed. As mentioned, solar PV is a little bit different because it doesn't rely on the spinning of a turbine in order to generate electricity, and in fact it does much more at a molecular level. So instead of me trying to recall my grade 11 physics to explain it to you, we have a video queued up as well. All right, there's actually some really great questions popping up on the left-hand corner, so we're actually going to encourage probably some of you to help us answer them, because I don't think we might not have all the answers. But solar PV, after that video, essentially the solar cells can be arranged in a variety of ways, from being installed on commercial rooftops to being mounted onto the ground. When they are mounted on the ground, typically they can track and move according to the sun. There are single-axis trackers and there are dual-axis trackers. Technically, dual-axis trackers should result in better production, but mechanical issues may also arise when you're tracking two ways. So it's a give and take when it comes to these forms of technologies. So after covering the types of renewable energy in Ontario, we briefly wanted to go over the regulatory and governance bodies that exist. So in a nutshell, this is what the energy sector in Ontario currently looks like, with the Ontario Ministry of Energy being the main legislative body that governs the organizations below it, from judicial boards including the Ontario Energy Board to the now amalgamated body that is the IESO. As many of you may know, previously the Ontario Power Authority and the Independent Electricity Systems Operator of Ontario were separate entities, but as of the 1st of January 2015, I believe, they have been amalgamated into one single body. So a lot of the energy procurement responsibilities that the Ontario Power Authority were in charge of, including procuring renewable energy through both the Feed-in Tariff program, which we'll review in just a little bit, and also large renewable energy projects through the large renewable procurement process. Sorry, my mind blanked there for a second. That's all been absorbed now into the IESO. Previously, the IESO was mainly responsible for monitoring market demand and ensuring we had appropriate supply. As well, we have Ontario Power Generation, Hydro One, which is a very large corporation, and also local distribution companies. Yeah. So we're going to go into each organization now, just to cover them quickly. So the Ontario Ministry of Energy oversees, in general, power generation in Ontario and is responsible for the visioning of the energy sector, including, most recently, the development of the LTEP, the Long-Term Energy Plan. That's available on their website, I believe. So they do have jurisdiction. They provide directives, for example, to the following organizations that then must enact those changes accordingly. We have the Independent Electricity System Operators of Ontario, there's actually a video for this one, so we're going to cue that up. All right, so that video was produced by the Ontario Ministry of Energy. They have a whole energy literacy campaign out right now called Empower Me, and we at TREC here did see the videos that they did produce recently. On top of that one, they talk about sort of what's a kilowatt hour. They go more in depth into transmission grids and distribution grids. Some actually very informative materials, so feel free to please check it out, and we could post the link at the end of this as well. So outside of the Ministry of Energy, there is also the Independent Electricity System Operator of Ontario. Yes, Angela, that is very interesting. And so they are a Crown corporation, and their job is to basically maintain the electricity market in Ontario, which includes forecasting the supply and demand in the short and long term. But interestingly enough, in the short term, we've been to the ISO before here at TREC, and what they will do is they will forecast the demand, and then they'll start buying electricity to match that demand. It's a very interesting process through which they purchase it. They try to do it based on price. And then there's that global adjustment that comes at the end to balance it all out. They are also sort of responsible for ensuring that in emergency situations, the grid is kept running, so they have a variety of locations to ensure that they can do so. There is also the Ontario Energy Board, which is the judicial board. If any of you have an experience with the Ontario Municipal Board, sort of fits within the same parameters, I suppose. In general, the OEB is in charge of authorizing the increase in rates, increase in fees for distribution, for example, and they also are very closely tied to the approval of gas plants and the placement of gas plants. We also have Hydro One. Hydro One is Ontario's largest distribution company, so to speak. They are also in charge of maintaining transmission lines that go across the province. If you live in an urban area, you are very likely regulated, or under the jurisdiction of a local distribution company that isn't Hydro One. But if you live in a rural area or even in Northern Ontario, for example, you most likely do your business with Hydro One. Outside of that, we have very many local distribution companies within the province. If you live in Toronto, that's Toronto Hydro. If you live in Mississauga, it's EnerSource, et cetera, et cetera. And they are in charge of the local distribution of electricity within your region. And so if there is ever a power outage, as long as it's not a transformer issue or a larger transmission issue, your LDC is very likely who you are dealing with. All these organizations do have to work within the confines of acts that are passed by the legislature and also passed down by the Ministry of Energy. And most recently, in 2009, we had the introduction of the Green Energy and Economy Act, which demonstrated the government's commitment to green energy, economic development, and community empowerment. With this act, there were four main things that are introduced, the first being the Feed-in Tariff Program, the Renewable Energy Facilitation Office, the Community Energy Partnership Program, which graciously funded this webinar, and also changes to the Co-op Act, which allowed co-ops to participate. So the Feed-in Tariff Program is now administered by the ISO, previously the OPA, and what it does is it provides a price that is guaranteed for renewable energy production over a given period of time. Right now, this is only for projects under 500 kilowatts in size, so mostly you'll see biogas, solar PV projects going through the Feed-in Tariff Program. The reason there is a guaranteed price, and that price is determined to cover costs of project development as well as provide a return on investment. So it is an incentive model for investment in renewables. This is in contrast to the RFP, or the request for proposal model, where energy companies typically bid in to produce a certain amount of electricity. Sometimes the type of energy it produces, whether it's renewable or not, for example, is dictated, but they are supposed to bid in at a competitive price. Oftentimes, arguably so, it excludes smaller players. So the Feed-in Tariff Program that was introduced, it supports both community and Aboriginal groups. So for example, as of the FIT 2.1 window, it was only renewable energy co-ops that could participate, and Aboriginal groups are able to participate as well. Part of the Feed-in Tariff Program is that Community Energy Partnership Program, which I mentioned. So the Community Energy Partnership Program not only provides funding for these sort of educational initiatives, but it also provides funding for co-ops that are developing projects to help cover some of their costs. Also within the Feed-in Tariff Program, there are community power set-asides for community-led projects to ensure that co-ops do have access to parts of the grid. However, with every FIT window, these policies may change. So this was true most recently as of the FIT 3 window. So if we take a look at renewable energy in Ontario, we know that renewable energy accounts for about 35% of installed capacity. We had to crunch the numbers a little bit, because at the transmission level, which is what the IESO talks about, they exclude solar. Solar is typically connected at the distribution level. And wind and solar are experiencing the fastest growth in this province right now. So within the feed-in tariff and this renewable energy framework, we are provided this opportunity to engage in community power. Community power takes many shapes in the world, and it essentially includes co-ops, individuals, farmers, or even neighborhood-owned projects. The general principle is that communities raise money to finance renewable energy projects. By building these renewable energy projects, they create local jobs, and local site hosts also earn revenues. So for example, I'll talk about later, SolarShare being one co-op. It helps create local jobs by employing mid-sized renewable energy installers that are actually quite close to us, and also the landlords, the owners of the roofs that SolarShare develops on, earn a lease by hosting the site. Through this, by both generating revenues in jobs and through leases, but also paying back dividends or interest to the community, we hope to keep profits local as well. In most cases, and specifically in solar, since it is connected at the distribution level, the goal is also to have the energy consumed by the local community. Now, in Ontario, this is a little bit harder to track. We do not have a smart grid system, for example. However, we do try our best to demonstrate this impact. So up next, we're going to actually have Lucy Cummings from Faith in the Common Good talk a little bit about her example of community power through faith groups.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Wonderful. So good evening. My name is Lucy Cummings, and I'm the Executive Director of Faith in the Common Good. And Faith in the Common Good is a not-for-profit interfaith charitable network, and we're really dedicated to supporting faith communities of all backgrounds to help build greener, healthier, and more resilient communities. And we have been very proud to support faith communities to demonstrate their commitment to caring for creation, which we believe is a tenet of all faith communities, by engaging in solar. And that can be through installations on their faith properties, through investments in solar co-ops, or in participating in solar co-ops. So this webinar is the first in a series of webinars that Faith in the Common Good will be hosting in conjunction with a wide variety of community partners in order to provide tools and resources to faith communities that are interested in going down this road. So in Ontario, there are about 7,000 religious organizations, and according to the Ontario Power Authority, about 137 of these have rooftop solar installations, and we're quite proud that about 120 of these are in our network. But sadly, more recently, we've found that the excitement of the early adapters has somewhat faded, and so over the next year, we'll be engaging in what we're calling a solar faith revival, where we will be publishing tools and resources, including webinars like this, but also articles and website tools like this case study, which you see here. This is the Richards Memorial United Church, and they have a rooftop solar project that was installed in 2011, and this is an example of the case studies that we have online. So we'll be looking at these 100 or so communities and surveying them and learning from them about what worked, what didn't, where there was the payback analysis, what they expected, what were the challenges they faced within their congregations for financing around installation, and really trying to tell a detailed story so that other faith communities who are considering solar installation can learn from them. And that's really what our network is about. It's faith communities learning from other faith communities. So I'm just taking this time to say stay tuned. We will be, at the end of this webinar, we'll send out slides and contact details that will give you more information about our program. And I also wanted to just mention before I hand the reins back over that our case studies really cover a wide variety of faith communities. So you'll find examples of different faith traditions. Debbie Mandir in Pickering has an amazing example of a rooftop solar installation. They're a Hindu community. Darhe Noam in Toronto has another rooftop installation that's part of our case studies. More recently, Port Nelson United in Burlington had participated in a larger co-op, which is really exciting to read about. And other faith communities don't have the space to install. So, for example, Erin Mills United in Mississauga made a decision as a community to invest in SolarShare as their way to demonstrate their interest in giving back to the community. So I think at the end of the day, as this slide here from Morningstar-High Park Presbyterian illustrates, our goal is to show how faith communities can be neighborhood role models in supporting renewable energy around the country, but especially in Ontario by taking advantage of the FIT system. We think it's a good deal for faith communities, and if we don't have the answers to help you in your exploration of this, we'll work hard to put you in touch with the experts who can. So I'm happy to answer more questions at the end of the presentation, and I know we have colleagues on the line that may know more than I. So thank you all very much.
That is great, Lucy. There is some really cool stuff going on there, and I'm really glad that we're continuing to sort of build that collective capacity, collect our knowledge, and be able to share resources with those who are interested in doing similar things, because that is the only way we're going to continue to proliferate the community power model in Ontario. So that's really great to hear. I want to cover, sort of before we end off, the cooperative model that has started to grow in Ontario in order to participate in renewable energy and community power as well. So the co-op model is a member-based corporation, essentially. It is a corporation in which one member has one vote, regardless of how much they have invested in that corporation through shares or bonds. So it is a very, very democratic business structure. The co-op model, before the introduction of the Green Energy Act, actually probably wouldn't have been able to participate in the renewable energy space, mainly due to a business with member rule that existed within the co-op legislation. However, with the introduction of the Green Energy Act, they created this designation of a renewable energy co-op, which allowed members to buy shares or bond in a corporation co-op that was investing in renewable energy project, particularly through developing renewable energy directly. And the other thing to keep in mind about co-op models is that they place high priority on ethical business and meeting the needs of their members. If you are part of a renewable energy co-op, you are more than welcome to join the AGM every year that happens, the annual general meeting, where you can bring your concerns and your questions to the board and make your voice heard as well. So community power and cooperatives in Ontario, approximately about 70, it changes day to day depending on how many are registered or deregistered, but there are about 70 to 80 community power renewable energy co-ops in Ontario. And their memberships range from about 50 members in some cases to higher than that now, over 800 members in some of the largest co-ops. And their portfolio sizes range from anywhere from 250 kilowatts to 5 megawatts. So 250 kilowatts, that's probably around the size of a typical storage facility you might see in the city, for example. So we're just going to case study two renewable energy co-ops to demonstrate their potential and their impact. So one is SolarShare. SolarShare is one of Ontario's largest solar PV co-ops, and they are at over 800 members right now, and they have raised over $9 million in bonds. So members purchase memberships in the co-op, and they purchase bonds, which are used to help finance solar projects within Ontario. SolarShare, unlike some other renewable energy co-ops, has sort of a province-wide scale, so they have memberships across the province and projects across the province as well, whereas some renewable and solar co-ops decide to stay local. There are also co-ops going on within the biogas space. One of the more prominent ones is ZooShare. So ZooShare biogas co-op is just over 500 members now, I believe, and they are around $2 million in bonds raised. They are working towards developing a biogas digester at the Toronto Zoo. It's a really cool project because they plan to take poo from the animals at the zoo and food waste from one of Canada's largest food distributors and use that to make the organic mass that is then digested to create gas. I know sometimes there are concerns in this case about sort of food versus energy and the ethics behind that, but currently most of the food, if it were not going towards this project, would have gone towards another organic waste disposal solution. So it's really beneficial to have this co-op to be able to, for example, add value to this waste by providing both community involvement and a renewable form of energy. So in conclusion, before we take questions, renewable energy is definitely still part of the future of energy production in Ontario, and there is legislation that currently supports the sector to grow. Also, more importantly, I think there are many exciting opportunities and options through renewable energy co-ops, through associations and organizations like Faith and the Common Good for community involvement and for individual involvement in renewable energy development. That part is very key. So there are a few resources that we had up. We can share some links after this, but I do need to acknowledge that this initiative, this presentation, was made possible in part through the financial support of the Education and Capacity Building Program brought to you by the Independent Electricity System Operator of Ontario. Hopefully you remember who that is after this webinar. TREC and the FCPC and the presenters are solely responsible for the implementation of this initiative, and the ISO has no responsibility or liability whatsoever in the event that any person suffers any losses or damages as a result of this initiative.